Have you heard of Jacob, the man who began his life marked by deception, but ended as the patriarch of an entire nation? How could someone with such a controversial past be chosen for such a crucial role in God's plan? In this video, we will delve into Jacob's fascinating journey, a life filled with highs and lows, internal and external struggles, but most importantly, profound transformations. Jacob's story doesn't start with him. Before his birth, there was the promise made to Abraham, a covenant ensuring his descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky. This promise passed to Isaac, the child of the promise, and now awaited a new generation to continue this legacy. Isaac and Rebekah, eager for children, endured a long period of waiting until God heard their prayers. Rebekah conceived, but her pregnancy was far from peaceful. Intense and unsettling movements in Rebekah's womb led her to seek answers through a heartfelt prayer. The response she received was both illuminating and troubling. 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. Genesis 25:23. This prophecy introduced a paradox. In a culture where the firstborn carried unique privileges and responsibilities, how could the older serve the younger? It was an inversion of social norms, a sign that something extraordinary was about to unfold. When the time for the birth arrived, the prophecy began to manifest. Esau was born first, with striking physical characteristics that amazed everyone. His reddish skin and hair-covered body gave him a wild and vigorous appearance, traits reflecting the intense life he would lead. His name, Esau, meaning hairy, also carried connotations of ruggedness and innate strength. Right behind him came Jacob, but he didn't come alone. His hand clutched Esau's heel as if trying to pull him back. This seemingly simple act foreshadowed his lifelong struggle for prominence. Jacob's name could be translated as "he who grasps" or "he who supplants," a title that became a burden he would carry throughout his life. As they grew, the differences between the brothers became increasingly evident. Esau was Isaac's favorite, captivating his father with his physical prowess and hunting skills. A man of the field, Esau's untamed spirit connected with nature. He lived in the moment, seeking immediate pleasure and satisfaction in his achievements. Jacob, on the other hand, was his opposite. Quiet and introspective, he preferred the calm of the tents, where he honed his skills in negotiation, planning, and observation. Rebekah, who seemed to see beyond the obvious, devoted special care to Jacob, recognizing in him a depth that Isaac perhaps overlooked. This family dynamic not only reinforced the rivalry between the brothers, but also set them on paths destined to collide. The breaking point came in a moment of weakness and opportunity. Esau, returning famished from a hunt, entered the tent where Jacob was preparing a fragrant stew. The aroma was irresistible, and his hunger could not wait. He pleaded, "Let me eat some of that red stew, for I am exhausted." Jacob, seeing his brother's vulnerability, seized the chance. "First, sell me your birthright," he replied, with a calmness that belied his determination. Esau, without considering the consequences, exclaimed, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" And so, with just a few words, the firstborn relinquished what was his by birth. What Esau despised wasn't merely a hierarchical position, but an ancestral legacy that encompassed leadership, responsibility, and a special blessing ensuring the continuation of his lineage. Jacob, shrewdly, took for himself a right that, in the eyes of the culture of the time, seemed unattainable. Though Esau agreed to the exchange, this transaction was merely the surface of a much deeper conflict. Isaac's blessing, which validated the birthright, still had to be obtained. Jacob knew his journey was just beginning, and the next step would require more than words. It would demand courage, strategy, and perhaps even a measure of morally questionable boldness. As Esau digested the lentil stew, unaware of the full implications of what had just occurred, Jacob was already envisioning the future. He knew he would need to rise to the challenge he had set for himself. The conflict between the brothers was far from over, and Jacob's next move would be decisive. The tension in Isaac and Rebekah's household had silently grown over the years. While Esau had traded his birthright for a bowl of lentils, there was still one crucial element that secured the firstborn's position: the father's blessing. In Semitic tradition, this blessing was a sacred act that conferred authority, prosperity, and the continuation of a special lineage. Isaac, now elderly and nearly blind, understood that his time was drawing to a close. He secretly called Esau and said, "Go out to the field and hunt game for me, and prepare for me a savory dish, such as I love, and bring it to me so that I may eat, and my soul may bless you before I die." Genesis 27:3-4. Esau, loyal and eager to please his father, left immediately. Rebekah, however, was listening intently. She overheard every word of that conversation. She knew the blessing should go to Jacob, as foretold in the prophecy she received during her pregnancy. But she also understood that Isaac did not share this vision. To her, this was a decisive moment. Act now, or watch the promise slip away. Rebekah approached Jacob with a bold plan. "I heard your father speak to Esau. Now, my son, obey my voice as I command you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats. I will prepare them as a savory dish, just as your father loves. Then you shall take it to him, so that he may bless you before Esau returns." Jacob hesitated. "But my father might touch me and see that I am smooth-skinned. He will know I am an impostor and bring a curse upon me instead of a blessing." But Rebekah, resolute, replied, "Let that curse fall on me, my son. Just do as I say." With a mix of fear and obedience, Jacob did as his mother instructed. As he brought the goats, Rebekah worked to ensure every detail was perfect. She prepared the meat with spices she knew would please her husband and dressed Jacob in Esau's best garments, which still carried the scent of the fields. To address the issue of touch, she covered Jacob's hands and neck with goat skins, mimicking Esau's rough and hairy texture. Jacob, his hands trembling and heart pounding, entered Isaac's tent carrying the dish. "My father," he said, trying to mimic Esau's deep, confident voice. Isaac, though blind, still possessed a keen sense of perception. "Who are you, my son?" he asked, his tone tinged with doubt. "I am Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you asked. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that your soul may bless me." Isaac hesitated. Something felt off. "How did you find the game so quickly?" Jacob, under pressure, replied, "The Lord your God granted me success." Still, Isaac remained suspicious. "Come near so I can touch you, my son, to know whether you are truly my son Esau." Jacob's heart nearly stopped. He approached slowly as Isaac reached out his hands. The touch of the goatskins, carefully secured by Rebekah, convinced the patriarch. The voice is Jacob's, but the hands are Esau's. Isaac then ate the meal prepared for him and, satisfied, called Jacob closer. Placing his hands on his son's head, he spoke words that would alter the course of history. "May God give you the dew of heaven and the richness of the earth, and an abundance of grain and wine. May nations serve you and peoples bow down to you. Be lord over your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. Cursed be those who curse you, and blessed be those who bless you." Genesis 27:28-29. The blessing was given. Jacob, still bearing the weight of the moment, left the tent quickly. It didn't take long for Esau to return with his game. He prepared the dish and entered his father's presence joyfully, expecting to receive the blessing. "Rise, my father, and eat some of your son's game, so that your soul may bless me." Isaac's expression changed. His body began to tremble violently. "Who was it then that hunted game and brought it to me? I ate it before you came, and I have blessed him, and he will indeed be blessed." Esau, upon realizing what had happened, let out a cry of anguish. "Bless me too, my father." But Isaac, weeping, replied, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." Esau exclaimed, "Isn't he rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took my birthright, and now he has taken my blessing." Overcome with hatred, Esau vowed revenge. "After the days of mourning for my father are over, I will kill Jacob." Rebekah, sensing the danger, urgently called Jacob and said, "Flee to my brother Laban's house in Haran. Stay there until your brother's fury subsides." Jacob, though he had secured the blessing, now departed in exile, leaving behind his family and everything he had ever known. As he walked toward the unknown, he carried not only the blessing he had so desperately sought, but also the guilt and weight of the consequences of his actions. Little did he know that on his journey he would encounter something far greater than his father's approval. Now a fugitive, Jacob left behind the safety of his home, the protection of his mother, and the comfort of a familiar life. Each step on the path to Haran was filled with uncertainty and fear. He knew Esau's hatred was real, and his brother's vow of revenge was not empty. With no allies and no clear direction, all Jacob possessed was the blessing he had received from Isaac and the burden of the choices that had brought him here. The desert around him was vast, and the solitude magnified the thoughts swirling in his mind. By day, the scorching sun made him question whether he would survive the journey. By night, the profound silence brought a sense of vulnerability. Jacob was alone, yet unaware that this moment of abandonment would serve as the prelude to a transformative encounter. On one particularly exhausting night, Jacob stopped to rest. He found a stone and used it as an improvised pillow. Lying under the vast starry sky, he finally succumbed to his fatigue. But as he slept, something extraordinary happened. Jacob had a dream. Before him stood a ladder reaching to the heavens. Angels ascended and descended on it, as if bridging 2 worlds. At the top of the ladder was a majestic figure watching over him. It was a vision so powerful it seemed to transcend the boundaries of a mere dream. Then a voice echoed, breaking the silence of the scene. "I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, and to the south. In you and your offspring all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you." Genesis 28:13-15. The ladder, the central symbol of this encounter, represented the connection between the heavenly and earthly realms, a reminder that even in his state of exile and vulnerability, Jacob was under the watchful care of a greater purpose. The angels ascending and descending symbolized the continuous interaction between the divine and the human, a message that the earth was not disconnected from heaven. For Jacob, the vision was both comforting and challenging. Bearing the weight of his past mistakes, he now had the assurance that he was not alone. Yet this promise came with a responsibility. He could no longer live as he had before. His journey was not just physical, it was spiritual. When he awoke, Jacob was filled with reverence and awe. He looked around as if expecting to find evidence of what he had seen. Everything seemed the same, yet nothing was as it had been. "How awesome is this place!" he exclaimed. "This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven." Jacob took the stone he had used as a pillow and set it up as a pillar, pouring oil over it in an act of consecration. He named the place Bethel, meaning house of God. Then he made a vow. If God will be with me and keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and this stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give a tenth to you. Genesis 28:22. Jacob left Bethel with a renewed sense of purpose. Though the journey to Haran remained uncertain and fraught with challenges, he now carried the assurance that he was not alone. The promise he had received not only reaffirmed his role in Abraham's legacy, but also gave him the courage to face the unknown. What Jacob did not yet realize was that his arrival in Haran would bring new challenges, unexpected encounters, and lessons that would forever shape the man he was destined to become. Jacob eventually arrived in Haran after a journey that transformed him both internally and externally. As he approached the wells of the region where shepherds gathered to water their flocks, he felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. This land was not just a refuge, it was also the home of his uncle Laban, the man he hoped would welcome him. As Jacob watched the gathered shepherds, a young woman of uncommon beauty approached with her father's flock. Jacob was struck by her presence. It was Rachel, Laban's daughter. His heart, weary from the journey, found in her a refreshing hope that rekindled his spirit. With a display of strength and determination, he removed the heavy stone from the well to help her, an act that reflected his willingness and resolve. After introducing himself as Laban's nephew, Jacob was brought to his uncle's house. Laban welcomed him warmly, though behind his smile lay the cunning of a man skilled in exploiting situations to his advantage. Jacob quickly fell in love with Rachel. She was young, graceful, and possessed a charm that captivated him. Determined to win her hand, Jacob proposed a deal to Laban. He would work for 7 years in exchange for marrying Rachel. The years of service seemed like mere days to Jacob because his love for Rachel was deep and genuine. However, Laban, known for his shrewdness, had other plans in mind. At the end of the 7 years, the long-awaited moment arrived. Jacob was ready to marry Rachel, and Laban organized a feast to celebrate the union. But under the cover of night, Laban deceived Jacob, giving him his elder daughter, Leah, instead of Rachel. The following morning, when Jacob discovered the deception, he confronted Laban with fury and indignation. "Why have you deceived me? Wasn't it for Rachel that I served you?" Laban, with the composure of someone who had orchestrated every detail, replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older. Fulfill the week with Leah, and then I will give you Rachel as well in exchange for another 7 years of work." Though hurt, Jacob agreed to the terms. He married Rachel at the end of that week, but was now bound to serve Laban for an additional 7 years. The dynamics in Jacob's household became increasingly complex. Leah, who was unloved, sought to win Jacob's affection through her children. She bore him Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, hoping that each child would strengthen her bond with him. Rachel, on the other hand, endured the anguish of her barrenness. Despite being Jacob's favorite, her inability to conceive consumed her. The rivalry between the sisters created a tense and emotionally draining family atmosphere. After many years of prayers and pleas, Rachel finally conceived and gave birth to Joseph, the son who would become Jacob's most cherished child. While working for Laban, Jacob used his intelligence and strategy to prosper. He proposed a deal to his uncle. The speckled and spotted animals from the flock would be his reward for his labor. Believing he was taking advantage of Jacob, Laban agreed. But Jacob, with skill and knowledge, manipulated the breeding of the animals so that the strongest ones were speckled or spotted. As a result, he accumulated a large flock, becoming extremely prosperous despite Laban's exploitative conditions. Over time, the relationship between Jacob and Laban deteriorated. Jacob's prosperity provoked envy among Laban's sons, who began accusing him of stealing the family's wealth. Laban, ever calculating, also started treating Jacob more harshly. Recognizing that the situation had become unsustainable, Jacob made a decision. He would leave with his family and possessions to return to his father's land. He understood that to build the future he envisioned, he had to free himself from Laban's manipulations. On a quiet night, Jacob gathered his family and belongings and fled Haran without informing Laban. When Laban found out, he was furious and pursued Jacob. However, during his journey, Laban had a dream in which he was given a clear command. Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. When they finally met, the confrontation was tense but ended in a pact. Laban and Jacob set up a pillar as a witness that they would not harm each other. With that, Jacob left Haran behind, taking his wives, children, and possessions with him as he moved toward the next chapter of his journey. Though Jacob had overcome many challenges, he knew that a reunion with Esau was inevitable. Memories of the past haunted him, and uncertainty about how his brother would receive him filled him with dread. He had escaped Laban, but a reckoning with Esau still loomed. Jacob's return to his father's land was fraught with anxiety and fear. Years had passed since his flight, but the specter of Esau still loomed large. He knew that to move forward, he had to confront the brother who had sworn revenge. Yet, he had no idea how Esau would react. As he approached Canaan, Jacob's heart grew heavy. He sent messengers ahead with gifts for Esau in an attempt to appease him. The messengers returned with alarming news. Esau was coming to meet him with 400 men. It was impossible not to interpret this as a threat. Gripped by fear, Jacob divided his possessions, livestock, and family into two groups, reasoning that if Esau attacked one, the other might escape. After devising his strategies, Jacob did something unexpected. He isolated himself from the rest of his group, crossing the Jabbok River alone. In the darkness of the night, Jacob was utterly alone. His solitude was more than physical. It was spiritual and emotional. He carried the weight of his choices, his guilt, and his fear of what was to come. It was in this moment of vulnerability that something extraordinary happened. Suddenly, Jacob sensed a presence. A mysterious man appeared, and without a word began wrestling with him. This was no ordinary struggle. It was an intense physical and symbolic battle that lasted through the entire night. Jacob fought with all his might, but the man was incredibly strong. Yet Jacob refused to yield. For hours they grappled. Every move, every blow seemed to carry more than just physical strength. It was a fight for control over his destiny, for answers, and perhaps for absolution from his past. As dawn approached, the man touched Jacob's hip, instantly dislocating it. Despite the pain, Jacob would not let go. His determination was unwavering. Then the man spoke, "Let me go, for the day has broken." But Jacob, his voice firm and filled with emotion, replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man, acknowledging Jacob's persistence, asked, "What is your name?" Jacob responded, perhaps with a mixture of shame and pride, "Jacob." The name he bore meant "he who supplants," or Deceiver, a reflection of the life he had lived until that moment. Then the man declared, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel, for you have struggled with God and with men, and have prevailed." This declaration was a redefinition of his identity. Jacob, the deceiver, became Israel, the one who wrestles and triumphs. It was no longer just about him, but about the role he would play in forming a people who would bear his new name forever. Jacob realized this was no ordinary man. He was in the presence of something far greater, something that transcended his understanding. He named the place Peniel, meaning the face of God, and said, "I have seen God face to face, and yet my life has been preserved." At dawn, Jacob crossed the Jabbok River limping, a physical reminder of the struggle he had endured. But he was no longer the same man. Despite his pain, he now carried with him the certainty that he was no longer fighting alone. As Jacob continued on his way, still limping, he knew the moment to face Esau was drawing near. But now he was no longer driven solely by fear. He had been transformed, both in body and spirit, and he was ready for whatever lay ahead. Jacob's journey toward his reunion with Esau was fraught with anxiety, fear, and spiritual transformation. He was now Israel, but that did not erase the memories of the past. The last time he had seen Esau, his brother was full of rage, vowing to kill him for taking his blessing. Now, years later, Jacob had no idea how Esau would receive him. Jacob strategically organized his caravan, placing his servants at the front with flocks intended as gifts for Esau. Each group was instructed to say, "This is a gift sent to my lord Esau, and behold, Jacob is coming behind us." Jacob hoped these gestures would appease his brother's anger. As Jacob walked, he positioned himself at the rear, ensuring his wives and children were safely ahead. He was prepared for the worst, but still hoped for a miracle. From a distance, Jacob saw Esau approaching, accompanied by 400 men. His heart raced and fear once again gripped his mind. As he drew nearer, Jacob bowed to the ground 7 times, a gesture of humility and respect. What happened next was entirely unexpected. Esau, upon seeing Jacob, ran toward him, not with a sword in hand, but with open arms. He embraced Jacob warmly, threw himself on his neck, and wept. Jacob, overwhelmed with emotion, wept as well. Years of resentment and fear melted away in that moment of reconciliation. Esau then asked, "Who are these with you?" Jacob introduced his family, his wives, children, and all who accompanied him. Esau, astonished, inquired about the gifts Jacob had sent ahead. Jacob explained, "These are to find favor in your sight, my lord." But Esau responded, "I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have." Jacob insisted, "If I have found favor in your sight, accept this gift from me. For seeing your face is like seeing the face of God, now that you have received me favorably." Esau ultimately accepted the gifts, and the act solidified their reconciliation. After the reunion, Esau returned to the region of Seir, while Jacob continued his journey to Canaan. Though they had reconciled, their paths were destined to diverge. Jacob built an altar in Shechem, naming it El Elohe Israel, God, the God of Israel, in acknowledgement of the protection and grace that had accompanied him. Jacob had faced his fears and found in Esau something he never anticipated: forgiveness. Though his journey was far from over, that moment marked a new beginning for both him and his family. Jacob continued his journey to Canaan. Although the challenges of the past seemed resolved, he knew the future would bring its own trials. Just as his life had been marked by highs and lows, Jacob understood that his role as the patriarch of a great nation demanded renewed devotion and a deeper commitment. It was then that God spoke to Jacob again, instructing him, "Arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there. Make an altar to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau." Genesis 35:1. Jacob recognized this call as an opportunity to restore the covenant he had made years earlier when he had seen the vision of the ladder reaching to heaven. Before ascending to Bethel, Jacob made a significant decision. He called everyone in his caravan and said, "Put away the foreign gods that are among you. Purify yourselves and change your garments. Then let us arise and go up to Bethel, so that I may make an altar to the God who answered me in the day of my distress and has been with me wherever I have gone." Genesis 35:2-3. This act symbolized both physical and spiritual purification. Jacob was aware that his family had accumulated idols and practices that did not align with the renewed commitment he sought. All the idols were handed over to Jacob, who buried them under an oak tree near Shechem, a gesture of definitive abandonment of the past. The caravan set out for Bethel under God's protection. Scripture recounts that the terror of the Lord fell upon the cities that were around them, preventing any enemies from attacking Jacob and his family during the journey. Genesis 35:5. It was evident that Jacob was being led and protected, just as God had promised. Upon arriving at Bethel, Jacob built an altar at the site of his transformative encounter with God years earlier. He named the place El Bethel, the God of Bethel, in acknowledgement of God's faithfulness in his life. While they were at Bethel, an emotionally impactful event occurred for Jacob. Deborah, Rebekah's nurse, passed away and was buried under an oak tree, which was named Allon Bakuth, the Oak of Weeping. Deborah's death marked a poignant moment, symbolizing Jacob's growing role as the patriarch and leader of his family. While Jacob was at Bethel, God appeared to him again and reaffirmed the promises made to him. "Your name is Jacob. No longer shall your name be called Jacob, but Israel shall be your name. I am God Almighty. Be fruitful and multiply. A nation and a company of nations shall come from you, and kings shall come from your own body. The land that I gave to Abraham and Isaac, I will give to you, and I will give the land to your offspring after you." Genesis 35:10-12. These words revealed that despite his failures and struggles, Jacob was part of a greater plan. He was not merely leading his family, but inaugurating a nation destined to carry an eternal covenant. Bethel was not just a physical place, it was a space of spiritual renewal and commitment. There, Jacob acknowledged that his journey was not just about survival or earthly achievements, but about being an instrument in a divine purpose. With the covenant renewed, Jacob left Bethel strengthened. He knew that challenges still lay ahead, but he now had the assurance that God was with him every step of the way. Jacob's return to Bethel marked the closing of a cycle that began with his flight from Esau. The man who had once left in fear and insecurity now returned as Israel, transformed by struggle, reconciliation, and the renewal of his faith. Jacob continued his journey to Canaan, the land promised to him and his descendants. Yet, as so often before, his life remained marked by challenges and moments of sorrow. Jacob's path was not merely a story of triumphs, but also a testament to resilience in the face of adversities that shaped his character and legacy. While Jacob and his family traveled toward Ephrath, Rachel went into labor. It was a grueling journey, and the labor pains were intense. Despite efforts to assist her, Rachel realized her life was slipping away. With her final breath, she gave birth to a son and named him Benoni, meaning son of my sorrow. Jacob, however, renamed the boy Benjamin, son of the right hand, or son of happiness, perhaps in an attempt to turn tragedy into hope. Rachel's death was a devastating blow to Jacob. She was the great love of his life, the woman for whom he had worked 14 years. He buried her in Ephrath, which would later be known as Bethlehem, and set up a pillar in her memory, a monument that marked not only his loss, but also the strength of their bond. As a patriarch, Jacob faced not only external struggles, but also conflicts within his own household. His 12 sons, who would represent the 12 tribes of Israel, often clashed, testing his authority and leadership. One of the most difficult moments came with an incident involving Reuben, his firstborn, who dishonored his father by sleeping with Bilhah, Jacob's concubine. This act brought shame and division to the family, further fracturing the already fragile harmony among the brothers. The most devastating blow in Jacob's life came when he believed he had lost Joseph, Rachel's firstborn and the most beloved of his children. Out of jealousy, Joseph's brothers sold him into slavery and, to cover up their crime, dipped his tunic in animal blood, presenting it to Jacob. The sight of the bloodied tunic was enough to shatter Jacob emotionally. He tore his garments and mourned bitterly, saying, "I will go down to my son in mourning to the grave." Genesis 37:35. For years, Jacob lived in the anguish of believing Joseph was dead, unaware that his son's fate would eventually position him to save the entire family. The end of Jacob's life brought an unexpected twist. During a severe famine, he sent his sons to Egypt to seek provisions. There, Joseph, now the governor of Egypt, revealed his true identity to his brothers and invited Jacob to come and live in the land of Goshen. When Jacob received the news that Joseph was alive, he could hardly believe it. But upon seeing the carts sent by Joseph, his hope was renewed. "Enough! My son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die." Genesis 45:28. The reunion between Jacob and Joseph was one of the most emotional moments of his life. Upon seeing his son, Jacob embraced him and said, "Now I can die, for I have seen your face, that you are still alive." In the final years of his life, Jacob lived in Egypt with his family, witnessing the prosperity of his children and grandchildren. Before his death, he gathered his 12 sons to bless them, speaking words that served both as prophecies and reflections on their character. He also blessed Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, crossing his hands as he did so, placing his right hand on the younger son, Ephraim, in yet another demonstration that the natural order did not always dictate the greater purpose. Jacob lived to be 147 years old. Before dying, he made his sons swear to bury him in the land of Canaan, in the cave of Machpelah, where Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Rebekah, and Leah were buried. His death marked the end of an era, but his legacy would live on through his descendants, who would become the nation of Israel. Jacob was not perfect. He began his life as a man with questionable ambitions, but his journey was marked by transformative encounters that shaped his character. He was a man who wrestled with his brother, his father-in-law, himself, and with God. Yet, despite his flaws, he was chosen to play a central role in the story of humanity. Jacob, now Israel, left a legacy. His 12 tribes became the foundation of a nation, and his story continues to inspire, teach, and challenge us. Thank you.